Hi everyone, this is Eagle News. I am Rose Papa Angeles in Washington. It's Saturday, December 23rd, 2023 here in the nation's capital. The week's recap begins with the World Health Organization announcing the inclusion of Noma, an orofacial gangrene affecting malnourished children, in its official list of neglected tropical diseases. Rosel Feria reports.
Noma or cancrum oris or gangrenous stomatitis is now officially listed as a neglected tropical disease or NTD. Noma is a severe gangrenous disease of the mouth and face. It primarily affects malnourished young children between the ages of 2 and 6 years in regions of extreme poverty. It starts as an inflammation of the gums, which, if not treated early, spreads quickly to destroy facial tissues and bones. It frequently leads to death, with survivors suffering severe disfigurement. WHO says cases of Noma are mostly found in sub-Saharan Africa. Cases, however, have also been reported in the Americas and Asia. Evidence indicates that Noma is caused by bacteria found in the mouth. Risk factors associated with this disease include poor oral hygiene, malnutrition, weakened immune systems, infections, and extreme poverty. Noma is not contagious but tends to strike when the body's defenses are down. Accurate estimation of the number of Noma cases is challenging. Rapid progression of the disease and the associated stigma contribute to leaving many cases undiagnosed. WHO Chief Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus says Noma is more than a disease. He says it is a social marker of extreme poverty and malnutrition affecting the most vulnerable populations. Dr. Tedros adds that classifying Noma as a neglected tropical disease shines a light on a condition that has afflicted marginalized communities for centuries. Rosel Feria, Washington, D.C. Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
A top-level U.S. delegation will be heading to Mexico to discuss concerns on migration. This after telephone talks between Presidents Joe Biden and Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. Hvítá has the details.
President Joe Biden asked Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas, and White House Homeland Security Advisor Liz Sherwood Randall to travel to Mexico in the coming days. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby says the Biden team will meet with President Lopez Obrador and his team to discuss further collaborative actions to address current border challenges. The talks and trip come as the Republican Party pushes Biden's Democrats for major changes on immigration policy in exchange for approving a package of emergency assistance for Ukraine and Israel. Kirby says there has been a dramatic increase in migration across the border, largely from violence-ravaged Central American nations. Kirby says Biden and Lopez Obrador share a similar concern about the increase in migratory flow in recent weeks. He says the two presidents talked over the phone in broad terms about what can be done inside Mexico to slow that process down. Ideas include stepping up checkpoints on rail lines and highways and expanding the security presence on Mexico's southern border. Hvítá, Washington, D.C. Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
In Peru, authorities have seized some 4,000 turtles that originated in Amazon at the country's main international airport. Naya Dames tells us more.
Peru's National Forestry and Wildlife Service says it has intercepted a shipment of live turtles at the Jorge Chavez Airport. The turtles were headed to Indonesia. Among the reptiles were baby arrau turtles, the largest river turtle in South America, and the yellow-spotted river turtle. They were hidden in small transparent plastic containers inside cardboard boxes. Both turtles are listed as endangered species of wild fauna and flora. These require the tracking and regulation of trade. The International Union for Conservation of Nature lists the yellow-spotted river turtle as vulnerable to extinction. It is the second largest freshwater turtle in the Amazon. Interpol says the black market for illegal wildlife products is worth up to $20 billion per year. It pushes many species to the brink of extinction. Tortoises and turtles are among the most threatened groups of animals in the world. Naya Dames, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
A recent survey reveals that Canadians are worrying much about inflation, housing, and food in the coming year. Yolanda Espiras has that story.
The year 2023 will be ending with majority of Canadians in extreme worry and pessimism about the present and the future, a recent poll reports. The 2023 Canadian Poverty and Socio-Economic Analysis reports that most Canadians are seriously concerned about inflation, housing security, and food affordability. Single-parent families face the hardest struggles and report that they do not have enough income to cover their basic needs. 21% of Canadians report that they skip or reduce the size of at least one meal because they cannot afford to buy enough groceries. Parents report that they are eating less, so their children and other family members can eat. Additionally, the federal government has announced increases in pension and employment insurance taxes next year that may cost an additional $300 deducted from salary per Canadian worker. 1 in 3 Canadians report that they are concerned about their future personal finances, and over 40% are struggling mentally, which overall is not surprising, as worries about not being able to afford basic food and shelter take a toll on a personal overall well-being. Yolanda Espiras, Toronto, Ontario, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Extraordinary stories from Thomas I Likeness today. From the U.S.-Mexico border wall disrupting wildlife, to severe drought killing elephants in Zimbabwe, to a surgeon in France who sings to calm her patients. All these and more on Correspondent at Large.
And now news and commentary from around the globe. The U.S.-Mexico border wall, you know, the one that former U.S. President Donald Trump boasted he would make impossible to penetrate? Well, it's done little to keep people out. Hundreds still arrive every day. Like in Jordal, he's with the Center for Biological Diversity. He says what the wall does keep out is rare wildlife. He says it disrupts their migratory routes and threatens the very survival of the animals.
This structure stops the migrations of almost every species of wildlife larger than a pocket mouse. It cuts off migratory routes. It stops animals from finding food, water, mates, and it really slices this connected ecosystem into two.
And while it disrupts wildlife, Jordal says the structure is actually useless against migration and smuggling.
These walls are easily defeated with an angle grinder you can buy at Home Depot. They're not policy solutions. They may temporarily shift around human migration and traffic, but they're not stopping people from coming here.
Jordal adds the rush to build the wall has undermined years of careful conservation work by the government. More wildlife struggles. We go to the African nation of Zimbabwe for this story. An animal welfare group says at least 100 elephants have died in the country's biggest national park because of a lack of water. Wangi National Park is home to some 45,000 pachyderms. A severe drought has dried up the once abundant water holes in the park. They're just muddy puddles now. The animals have to walk long distances in search of food and water. Park spokesman Tanashi Ferraro says that's taken a toll on the animals.
From September up until mid-November or end of November, we've lost about 112 elephants, according to our statistics. The animals which were mainly affected were the old, the young, and the sick.
Blackened corpses scar a landscape that is bone dry from scorching temperatures that regularly hit 40 degrees Celsius. Game rangers have the grim task of cutting the tusks off the carcasses before the poachers find them. Just how much water do elephants need? Well, an average of 200 liters a day, along with about 140 kilograms of food. Hard to find in these dry conditions. If you vacation in Bali and want a hotel with a difference, make a reservation here. Private Jet Villa just opened this month and has just 2 luxury suites built in a Boeing 737. The plane is perched atop the Nyang Nyang Cliffs, giving guests a spectacular view of the coastline. Owner Felix Demine says he bought the abandoned plane with the thought of turning it into something that people could enjoy.
One of the ideas was, how I can create something interesting in this experience, and I combine the amazing location, amazing design of it, and craft it as an interesting experience for the people.
The plane can accommodate 4 guests in its 2 suites and features gourmet dining. This isn't discount accommodation, though. You'll have to save up to stay here. The whole plane can be booked for $7,300 a night. Have you ever had to have surgery? Were you nervous? Well, in France, there's a surgeon who soothes the patients he operates on by singing. Meet Dr. Aisha Endoy. She's an obstetrician and gynecologist in Bordeaux, France. Here, the good doctor is singing to a patient in the operating room as the anesthetist puts her to sleep. Dr. Endoy says music makes patients fall asleep more calmly. And she says waking up after surgery is much easier. She started doing this when she was an intern. Seems back then she had a patient that was so agitated they couldn't inject the anesthetic. In desperation, Endoy started singing, and that distracted the patient enough to allow them to put her to sleep. Since then, the surgical vocalist has made music an integral part of her work. You know, if the doctoring thing doesn't work out for her, I think she could have a great singing career. I'll be back in 7 days, and in the meantime, I wish you all peace, joy, and happiness in the ensuing week. Thomas I. Likeness, Correspondent at Large, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
It is called Early Adolescent Skills for Emotions or EASE. This is a new psychological intervention published by the World Health Organization and UNICEF to support adolescents in distress and their caregivers. Jeff Sanidad tells us more about the initiative.
One in every 7 adolescents in the world experience mental health conditions. These conditions usually go unseen and untreated. In an effort to address the critical shortage of mental health care for adolescents who are experiencing distress, World Health Organization and UNICEF published EASE Psychological Intervention. It is designed to support kids aged 10 to 15 years old who experience distress and their caregivers. EASE addresses symptoms of depression, anxiety, and stress. It includes group sessions for adolescents focused on building skills to cope with distress, plus sessions for their caregivers to promote supportive parenting and assist the adolescents in practicing skills from psychoeducation to stress management, from behavioral motivation to problem solving. EASE is the 6th psychological intervention in a series of low-intensity intervention released by the Global Health Agency. It can be delivered by trained non-specialist helpers under the supervisions of mental health professionals. Jeff Sanidad, Washington, D.C., Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
Canada has said farewell to single-use plastics, at least for now. The government's regulation banning the items has been ruled unconstitutional, but it has asked the court to stay an order quashing the ban while it appeals the decision. Thomas I. Likeness has the details on Down to Earth.
Some of the things no longer allowed are those plastic checkout bags, plastic straws, food containers, and those plastic knives and forks that you get with a takeout meal. 4 years ago, in 2019, worldwide, people produced an estimated 353 million tons of plastic waste. Canada's share of that is 3 million tons. Those grocery bags? The Canadian government figures 15 billion. 15 billion of them end up in the country's landfills, where they take at least 10 to 20 years to decompose. Other single-use plastics can take longer. The Canadian government wants to achieve zero plastic waste by the end of the decade. So, what's happening with the ban? For now, it stays in effect until the appeal quashing it is heard. Oil and chemical companies had successfully challenged the ban, calling it unreasonable and unconstitutional. And while we wait for the points of law to be settled, Canadian Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault says the science is clear. Plastic pollution is everywhere, and it harms wildlife and damages the environment. Quite simply, we're drowning in the stuff. Thomas I. Likeness, Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
And here's our photo of the week. Enjoy this beautiful shot of the Hvítá River in Iceland. Thank you, Ben Angeles, for sharing. Thank you all for joining us again. If there are stories or topics you want us to share with you, just comment below. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and X at Eagle News Live. I am Rose Papa Angeles. We live in extraordinary times. Happy weekend, everyone!